Did you know that in the U.S., more than 40% of people over 65 are living alone? That's a sobering number, isn't it? But living alone does not mean living in loneliness. Many have turned life after 65 into the happiest and most meaningful chapter of their lives. The question is, how did they do it? Does love truly disappear when old age comes, or does it simply change its form? And most importantly, how can someone face loneliness and then transform it into strength? If you're here today, perhaps deep down you've also asked yourself, after 65, after the children are grown, after the life partner is gone, how will I live? And that is why I want to share with you 9 precious lessons on love, lessons that so many older adults only wish they had known earlier. Believe me, these lessons can change the way you look at your own aging. Before I tell you, I ask for just one small thing. Hit like and subscribe, because that will let YouTube know you want more heartfelt advice made just for our age. And to let me know you are truly here with me, leave a comment with the number 1 if you believe that love never dies. It only changes. Or 0 if you believe old age means the end of love. I will be so glad to read those numbers in the comments. And now, let's begin with the first lesson. A lesson many older adults told me they wish they had understood sooner, because it would have made their lives so much happier. That lesson is this: accept the changes of love. I want to tell you about Robert, 68, a man from Texas. He had lived happily with his wife for more than 40 years. But then she passed away after a sudden illness. For many years, Robert sank into grief and believed his life was over. He often sat alone in his empty house, never turning on the TV, never speaking to anyone. He thought old age meant nothing but loss and endings. But then something unexpected happened. At a local church service, he met Carol, 66, also a widow. They began talking, sharing their experiences of loss, and slowly found connection. Over time, that friendship grew into a new relationship. Robert realized that love never truly disappears. It only changes its form. He told me a line I will never forget. When I was 30, love was passion. When I was 50, love was a responsibility. And now, at 68, love is companionship. And that is a truth many older adults overlook. As we age, love does not vanish. It becomes quieter, deeper, less stormy, but more enduring. If you still have a life partner, learn to accept that the relationship will change. It won't be like the years of youth. And if you have lost your life partner, never believe your heart has no more room for love. Because, like Robert, you may find a new love, or at least companionship, that makes life meaningful again. This first lesson brings you a clear message. Don't fear the changes of love. Let it lead you to something new, instead of locking your heart in the past. And from this very lesson, we see another important truth. If love on the outside can change, then inner love, love for yourself, is the one thing that should never be lost. That will be the second lesson I want to share with you. You see, Robert learned how to open his heart to welcome a new love. But not everyone has that chance or that luck. And even if they do, there is something even more important he often emphasized to his peers. If I don't learn to love myself, I will never have the strength to love anyone else. This is the second lesson. Love yourself, even when you live alone. I want to tell you about Linda, 72, a former high school teacher in California. After her husband passed and her children moved out, she often felt invisible. She spent most of her time in an empty house, circling around the old TV. There were days she didn't change clothes, didn't step outside, not even look in the mirror. One day, during a health checkup, her doctor told her blood pressure was high, her mental state was collapsing, and if she didn't make changes, she could be at risk of a stroke. That warning was like a wake-up call. Linda started with small steps. Every morning she walked once around the block, bought a journal to write down 3 things she was grateful for each day, and most importantly, She began looking at herself in the mirror and smiling. She said, "I spent my whole life teaching students, taking care of my husband and children. But it wasn't until I turned 70 that I finally learned how to take care of myself." And then something miraculous happened. Linda joined a senior yoga class, made friends with other women in the same situation, and began painting, something she had dreamed of since she was young, but never dared to try. Every day, she felt stronger, happier. Even her children noticed the change and told her, "Mom, you've never looked this happy before." The message from this story is clear. Old age does not mean giving up on yourself. On the contrary, this is the time when we must care for, nurture, and love ourselves more than ever. When you love yourself, you can give love to others, whether it's to your children, your friends, or even a new life partner. And you know what? The moment Linda began to love herself, she no longer feared loneliness. Instead of running from it, she learned to embrace it. Loneliness was no longer emptiness. It became the opportunity to discover her inner strength. And that is the bridge leading us to another lesson, one that many people over 65 often realize too late. Loneliness is not just a sadness. It can be a silent teacher, showing us how to grow within old age itself. And that will be the next lesson I want to share with you. When Linda learned to love herself, she also discovered a truth that was not easy at all. No matter how much our children love us, no matter how close our friends are, there will be moments when we must face loneliness. And after 65, those moments happen more often than we think. Let me tell you about James, 78, a former engineer from Texas. After retirement, he thought he would enjoy his time with his wife and old friends. But then his wife died suddenly of heart disease, and friends gradually drifted away. Some moved, some became too frail. James said the afternoons in his empty house were the hardest to bear. The ticking of the clock felt like a reminder of the emptiness in his heart. He once tried to fill that void with TV, with quick meals just to get through the day. But then he realized, the more he avoided it, the lonelier he felt. Until one day, while talking with a pastor at his local church, he heard a sentence that changed his life. "James, loneliness is not the enemy. It can be a teacher, if you learn to listen." From then on, James began to change. Instead of fearing quiet afternoons, he turned them into time for reading, for writing down the memories of his life, and even for learning guitar, something he had dreamed of since youth but never had time for. He also volunteered to tutor neighborhood children in math for free. He realized that loneliness did not disappear, but it became a space for him to rediscover himself and connect with others in a new way. James's story reminds us of something important. Loneliness is an inevitable part of old age, but we can choose how to live with it. We can let it consume us, or we can turn it into an opportunity to grow, to create, and to love more deeply. And you know what? Many people in their 70s and 80s have told me that it was precisely those quiet moments, those times spent alone, that helped them realize the true meaning of friendship, of family, and of love. When you learn how to live with loneliness, you no longer run away from it. Instead, you begin to enjoy the peace it brings. And that very peace opens another door, a door leading to a crucial lesson. Your mental and physical health is the foundation for living fully, even when you are on your own. After James learned how to live with loneliness, he also realized an obvious truth that is often forgotten. Without health, all efforts to live alone become meaningless. I clearly remember the story of Evelyn, 76, who lived alone in a small apartment in Florida. She was very independent. She did her own shopping, tended her flower garden, and even drove herself to church every week. But one day, while climbing onto a chair to reach a vase on a shelf, she slipped and fell. Luckily, a neighbor found her in time, but the fall broke her hip and kept her in the hospital for weeks. Afterward, she admitted, "I am not afraid of being alone, but I am afraid of losing the ability to take care of myself." Evelyn's story is not uncommon. In the U.S., Millions of older adults live alone, and many studies show that just one fall or one health crisis can change their entire life. That is why, if you want to live alone after 65, 70, or even 80, taking care of your health is no longer optional. It is your responsibility to yourself. And that doesn't stop at eating healthy or exercising regularly. It also means listening to your body, going for regular checkups, and most importantly, not being afraid to ask for help when you need it. I have met many patients who hid their illnesses for fear of troubling their children until things became serious. But the truth is this: health doesn't wait. If you let it go too long, you won't just lose the ability to live on your own, you'll lose the independence you've worked your whole life to preserve. And here's another interesting truth. When you take care of your physical health, you are also caring for your mental health. Because a strong body brings confidence, joy, and the ability to fully enjoy your moments alone without fear. Imagine this. Every morning, you wake up, make yourself a cup of coffee, take a walk around the neighborhood, then sit and read under the morning sun. All those small things become precious and possible only if your health is strong enough. So the lesson here is this: if you want to live alone happily, you must build a solid foundation of health. And once you have health, you gain freedom, the freedom to enjoy, to create, and to connect with yourself. But health, no matter how important, is still not enough to keep the heart warm. Because there is something many people only realize late in life. Friendships and social connections are the true keys to fighting against chronic loneliness. And that is where the next lesson begins. Health keeps our legs steady, but only friendship and social ties keep our hearts from becoming empty. I will never forget Richard, 81, a widower for more than 10 years, living alone in a small house in Ohio. He told me that in the early days after his wife passed, the house fell into a heavy silence, each meal with only one chair pulled out, and the ticking clock felt endless. He even thought loneliness was scarier than death. But everything changed when an old friend invited him to join the town's chess club. At first, Richard only went half-heartedly, but then he realized that each game, each bit of small talk, each burst of laughter in that room was like a precious medicine, bringing back the joy he thought he had lost. He once said, "I still live alone, but I have never felt alone again." Science proves this, too. Studies in the U.S. show that older adults who maintain friendships and social activities have lower risks of depression, live longer, and enjoy a higher quality of life. Friendship doesn't need to be large. Sometimes just a few close friends, a small group sharing the same interests, is enough to keep the soul warm and healthy. And the important truth is this: friendship does not come on its own. We must actively build and nurture it. Don't be afraid to start a conversation, to join a club, a volunteer group, or simply to call up an old friend. Old age is not the time to close the door on relationships. It is the time we need them more than ever. So this lesson wants to remind you, living alone does not mean living in loneliness. You can live independently, but always keep your heart open to new connections. Because sometimes a smile, a handshake, or an afternoon conversation with a friend can be the most precious longevity medicine of all. If you're still watching this video and find these insights helpful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Every day, I will bring you stories and lessons from real life and from the elders who came before us, so you'll always feel accompanied on the journey of aging. And leave a comment if you believe that friendship is the secret that makes life after 65 worth living. And from friendship, we move to something no less important, a subject that can determine happiness or unhappiness when living alone. Love and intimate relationships. From friendship, it's easy to think of something deeper. Love and life as a couple. Because no matter how many years you have lived, the heart still longs for connection and for sharing. I remember Eleanor, 87, who had lived with her husband for more than 60 years. When he passed, she said the bedroom suddenly felt strangely large, The bed that once felt crowded was now cold and too big. I didn't cry because he was gone, she said. I cried because in this room, there was no one left to say goodnight to. Eleanor's story brought tears to many because everyone understands that losing a life partner feels like losing a part of yourself. But what I admired most was how she chose to face it. She didn't close herself off in sorrow. She joined widow support groups where she could share old memories and, at the same time, learn how to move forward. She said, "Love doesn't disappear, it only changes its form. I still feel my husband's presence every day, in every habit, every piece of advice he left behind. On the other hand, I once met George, 74, who remarried after losing his wife. Many people gossiped, even criticized, but he just smiled. I'm not replacing her, I'm simply continuing the journey. My heart is big enough to hold on to the past and welcome the present." George reminded me that love has no age limit and no fixed pattern. For some, love is lifelong loyalty to a single memory. For others, love is the courage to open their heart once more. The most important thing is this: whatever choice you make, love and marriage after 65 are lessons in commitment, companionship, and how we face loss. If you are at this stage, remember there is no right or wrong answer. The only thing that matters is whether your heart finds peace and joy. And don't forget, memories of love are a priceless spiritual legacy we leave for our children and grandchildren. The letters, the photographs, or simply the stories you share with the next generation. These are how love continues to live, even when we are no longer here. And from love, naturally, we turn to something else important, something that often decides whether we live lightly or heavily in our later years. That is forgiveness and letting go of the past. When we talk about love, we inevitably think about old wounds, arguments, losses, things left unsaid. And this is where the seventh lesson becomes more important than ever: learning to forgive and let go of the past. I once met Judith, now 90, a woman who carried anger inside her for more than 30 years toward her younger brother. They fought over inheritance, and from that day on, they never spoke again. At every holiday, at every family gathering, Judith was either absent or sat silently in a corner. She admitted she had lost decades living in bitterness, and the most painful part was that her brother died before they ever had the chance to say a single word of apology. She told me, "That regret is 100 times heavier than the anger I once carried." Then I remembered Samuel, 85, a former soldier. He had long carried the scars of war, the haunting memory that he could not forgive himself for surviving while so many of his comrades did not. But one day, at a veterans gathering, an old friend took his hand and said, "We are alive to tell their story. That is honoring them, not guilt." From that moment, Samuel learned to forgive himself. He said his heart felt lighter, and he began to smile more and sleep more peacefully. Forgiveness is not always easy, but it is a gift you give yourself. Because when we cling tightly to the past, we only make old age heavier. But when we let go, we are free to enjoy the days we have left with a peaceful heart. As Judith once said, "If I could go back, I would have let it go from the very first day." Because when you forgive, you lose nothing. You only reclaim peace for yourself. If you are holding on to anger, onto an unhealed wound in your heart, my advice is this: start letting go today. Write a letter, make a phone call, or simply whisper forgiveness in your heart. Try it so your heart may feel lighter. And you know what? When we learn how to forgive, we also see more clearly what truly matters in life. And that is the final lesson, the one every elder longs to pass on to the next generation, the true meaning of life and the spiritual legacy we leave behind. After talking about forgiveness, I remembered one afternoon sitting with Eleanor, 92. She sat in her old wooden chair on the porch, gazing at the lavender garden she had planted with her own hands many years ago. She smiled and said, All my life, I thought the meaning of life was fame, work, and accumulating money. But after nearly a century, I realized what remains is not the checks or the achievements, but the marks I leave in the hearts of those around me. Her words struck deep into my heart. Truly, how many of us spend our lives chasing things that, in the end, we cannot take with us? And it is the small yet sacred things, a word of encouragement, a comforting smile, a timely hand to hold, that become the spiritual legacy we leave behind for our children and for those we love. I remember Thomas, 95, a humble man who spent his life as a teacher. He wasn't wealthy, he wasn't famous, but on the day he passed, the entire town came to his funeral. Former students wept openly. One said, "If it hadn't been for him, I would have dropped out in 8th grade." Another whispered, "He was the first person who believed I could do it." Thomas left behind no great fortune, but he left behind a generation filled with gratitude, a community he had planted with seeds of belief. And that is an immortal legacy. As we step into our later years, we realize that living long is not enough. What matters is living with meaning. And that meaning is not measured in years, but in the hearts we touch. People may forget what clothes you wore, what car you drove, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So the final lesson I want to leave you, and one that elders have confided to me, is this: live so that each day becomes part of your legacy. Leave behind kind words, genuine actions, and an example of compassion, for the day will come when we must go, but love and kindness will remain forever. And you know what? Once you understand the true meaning of life, you no longer fear old age. On the contrary, you see every single day you live as a gift, and a gift worth sharing. So we have now walked together through 9 profound lessons that love after 65 teaches us. We've learned that loving yourself is not selfish. It's the foundation for giving love to others. We've realized that loneliness is not the enemy if we learn how to turn it into a companion. We've reminded ourselves to treasure health as a priceless asset, to preserve friendships and social connections, for these are the threads that keep our hearts warm. We have walked through the pain of loss, learned forgiveness and letting go, and then discovered the true meaning of life and the spiritual legacy we leave for our children and grandchildren. And finally, we arrive at a simple yet priceless truth. Living fully in the present is the secret to not wasting a single heartbeat we still have. You see, love after 65 is not just about relationships. It is a journey of relearning how to love yourself, to love life, and to love even the fragility of aging itself. If these lessons touched you, leave a comment below and let me know. And if you have a personal story or experience to share, write it down, because your words may become the encouragement someone else needs. And before we close, I want to give you an invitation. What we shared today helps us live more beautifully, but one big question remains. How can we recognize the signs that predict our health and longevity after 70? What signals in our bodies might be whispering about our future that we often ignore? Don't miss the next video. 7 signs that predict how long you'll live after 70, scientifically proven. This video will open a new perspective, real, scientific, but also deeply human, so you can not only live longer, but live better. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next journey. Because every moment after 65 is not just about existing, it is an opportunity to live more fully.